All right, so we're going to start on article number 2. From System Concepts, article number 2, first down is first up. One of the secrets in Kabbalah is to see ourselves in everything. When we read Kabbalah, we need to ask ourselves, what does this have to do with me? We are learning a system of laws that starts from the thought of creation, cascading down to our world. Our advancement is exactly through the same path. The difference is that we grow our perception towards absolute internal power, our future state, instead of learning how reality was created, our past state. And here's a quote. This wisdom is generally divided into 2 parallel identical orders, like 2 drops in a pond. The only difference between them is that the first order extends from above downwards to this world, and the second order traverses from below upwards, precisely by the same roots and makeups imprinted at the root when they appeared from above downwards, from the essence of the wisdom of Kabbalah from Baal Sulam. The first restriction correlates to the barrier. This means that when we read about the vessel's development, 4 phases of direct light to the first restriction, we find the exact same development for us to pass the barrier. This is one of the biggest causes for failure and plateau on the Kabbalah path. We fall from the goal to become the creator and think we are on the path for the friends or for the world. This basically removes all our desire to actually reach the goal. When handling Kabbalistic materials, always relate them as your future, not as your past. So here's the first question. Question number 1. Why is it important to know that the first restriction is the barrier? We'll start with you, Rick.
Why is it important to know that the first restriction is the barrier? We have came down through the 4 phases and developed through each phase into the next. At the 4th phase, we are Malhut, and we are filled with the light of Ein Sof. So we have finally at this point become similarly in form or equivalence in form with the Creator. So it is when we reach that point and the desire to be the Creator is more than all our other desires that we are capable of passing the first restriction. So it is when we start to get to the point of realizing our internal power. Thank you.
Robin.
Let me look at that question again. Why is it, you've got to know that, because otherwise you'll plateau. You've got to know where your desires have been leading, when you've got all of the other phases in you, and Bechina Dalet, you form a powerful desire to cross the barrier, to want to be the creator. And I think if you're not aware of that, if you're not aware of the forces, if you're not anticipating, if your desire's not there to keep going, then the barrier might not form. You might not get a screen. You might not, I mean the barrier, not the barrier, I mean the screen. So you need to be aware of it.
Jeffrey. You're muted again.
Yeah, we recognize it as a hurdle so that, when we're sitting there at it, we're not like totally ignorant of what's been impeding our progress. Thank you.
Renee.
As Robin stated, and I agree, is that to recognize your environment is the first key in advancement, and you don't want to plateau or lessen in your practice the wisdom of Kabbalah. So yeah, I would say that's the biggest reason.
Rano.
I think it's like learning how to read a map correctly. You have to know what the scientific symbols on it are, what they mean, which means that if you're trying to find your way on it, then you will be able to, to do it efficiently. Because otherwise, we risk not just losing ourselves, but aiming wrong, or not. The barrier is one of the first intermediate objective that we have. So learning to recognize where it is and why it's there, it's help us get there faster, I think.
Peter.
Sorry, I was on mute. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. So the first restriction is Tzimtzum Aleph, and that's a shame. If that's because we didn't want to accept the light in the vessel, so that shame is what can turn us away from anything we have to do, because sometimes it's even more powerful than the goal. We have to accept that and not allow that to sway us off of the path.
Moshe.
Well, I mean, it's like Baal Sam writes, that the world was created from top down, and we have to work from bottom up, but precisely in the same way that it was created from top down. So everything's talking about your future state and what we have to reach, and it's just a milestone along the path. Basically, the path begins when you cross the barrier, and it's good to know that, to basically always move forward and not plateau and not accept anything less. But again, it's just, that should be like sort of the main desire, at least try to get to that point. After that, I don't know, but I need to, you need to reach this complete desire where all your desires are basically flip-flop. And it's more, it's a desire for bestowal and not receiving. And when that desire is complete, then you can cross the barrier.
Helen.
So we are all speaking the same language, and so I know how very, very far I am from it.
Lee, you want to give it a go? Why is it important to know that the first restriction is the barrier? Or do you want to wait for the second question?
Trying to have something pop in my head. Just, I'll wait.
Okay.
I was just thinking, once we start to realize that we are the creator, and the main desire is having and becoming aware of the internal power, for me personally, it's very, very, the responsibility is so big that I'm actually stunned. And I'm so happy to be in this group because you're really helping me.
It's important to know that the first chicken is the barrier, because when we're hearing the lessons from Rav, we need to understand that they're talking about us. We have a tendency to think that it's talking about some creature that was created a long time ago, and it's just so important for us to always understand it's always talking about us. It's always talking about our perception, our growth, and once we understand that, it will be much easier for us to not only listen to the lessons, but also able to remember stuff and for it to resonate with us. And for us to like feel that resistance. Do we agree? Do we not agree? But at least there's some response. The second question: how can we differentiate between reality, which is physicality, and perception, which is spirituality? Rick.
Well, if we kind of think about it, the corporeal reality that we live in, the physicality, is outside of us. And the perceptions that we seek are internal. So our spirituality would have to be an internal spring that we seek. Thank you.
Robin.
Yeah, I agree with Rick. Spirituality is how you're reacting to things and internally in your perception. I have a hard time describing that, other than just when something's true when you observe the events in your life and so on, and that's spirituality. And then outside, it's just life events. So I'm really not adding much here. I'm sorry.
Jeffrey.
Yeah, great question. It's from what I understand, it's the reality, corporate reality, is what is assaulting my five senses. And the spirituality, as they say, it's the internal, the emotional reaction that I'm getting right now, which is like automatic. I'm trying to get on top of this, be much less reactive. And like you say, internalize it. When I'm getting assaulted by my corporeal reality, it's just, rather than reacting in kind, just internalize it. Let it wash over me, as long as it's not life-threatening, and process it internally rather than acting externally. Thanks.
Renee.
Well, recently, my heart tells me that between physicality and spirituality, there is no difference. There is none beside him, and it's in our perception of that. And I've wanted so much to want to connect, even with my physical environment. I live in Florida. It's 95 degrees today, and every window in my house is open, so I can hear the birds and feel the breeze and feel the creator. When I'm inside my house, everything's shut up. I feel like, I'm not connecting. So I want to believe that which we are told to do, that we have already crossed. And I want to believe that everything I'm experiencing is all good, and that physicality might be your physical perception of what the creator is doing or making you feel. And as Jeffrey said, our perception is the discernment of it and what we do with that stimulus from the creator.
Lee.
Had to unmute. get to the right screen. Well, if it's, I guess the emotions, I'm trying to work on this, but I and I really don't feel like I have much to add. That's I'm feeling a lot today, and just overwhelmed in the Creator's love. So, I like what Renee said. Everything around us is awesome. It's the Creator staring us in physical form. So it is spirituality, just in a clothed, in this material matter, or however you want to say it. But then there's feeling the friends and building this Kli, and that is, gosh, I don't know. Next person. Thank you.
Rana.
Sorry, what is the question? I had to reboot my router.
How can we differentiate between reality, which is physicality, and perception, which is spirituality?
That's interesting. I think that anything that the reality, anything that is beyond our physical five senses, or anything that is not beyond our physical bodies, or anything that's come through our five senses is something that we have to be not take too seriously, because that's what we've done all our lives. It's kind of hard to get past this and get into what it's given to us through our connection together, our connection with the group. So I think that it's got to be. I remember Rav was trying to teach us to see things through the lens of the group. He repeated that several times. I think this is where we have to, get the new vision of what it's the perception of spirituality comes through.
Peter.
Oh yeah. Okay. Yeah, this is an area that I'm always thinking a lot about. I know that in physicality, in reality, like I can't tell. The only way I can relate to you is through your actions. I don't know your essence. I don't even know my own essence. So I can only relate back to you in the physical, in the corporeal world through my actions. And I believe my perception, if it's above the corporeal world and it's in a spiritual sense, and I'm not looking down up, which most do, but looking from the top down, from the spiritual perspective, I can see my perception is of what is happening around me is different than if I'm just relating to to somebody in a corporeal sense. And I'm still trying to get my arms around this concept. I find it fascinating, really.
Moshe.
On the surface, it seems like such a very basic question, right? Like, what's the difference between physicality and perception? Where, like, physicality, you could touch things, you could feel things. Spirituality, what is it? I don't know what it is. I can't touch it. I can't taste it. But it's like everyone was saying, physicality, right? Is like external things, right? But spirituality is internal. You can take things away from me externally. You can take away my car, my money, but you can't take away my perceptions. You can't take anything away from me inside. That's mine. So, that's the difference,
Ellen.
I see the difference between my imagination, which comes from the physical world, and spirituality is when I am empty, completely empty, and it's a very clear picture. So that is how I differentiate them.
Nechama.
Physicality is here in this reality where I do things, where I have my life, where I argue, where but the minute when I start to feel something, that's what's my feelings, my perceptions, and between the two, there needs to be a balance. Outside can be one thing, inside can be another thing, and we have to find the balance between the two. And that pushes us forward.
We're not trying to correct reality. We all share the same reality. So if someone is going to be at the end of correction right now and someone's going to be below the barrier, if they're sharing the same reality, it just shows that that's not what we're trying to correct. If someone dies, he'll die in both people's perception. What we're trying to correct is our perception, the feelings that we feel independent of other people. And that's where we're doing our correction. So when we see atrocities happen in the world, we're not trying to correct those. Those are corrected with physical actions, like armies and stuff like that. What we're trying to do is correct the way we perceive people, the way we perceive the world, the way we relate to it and react to it. And that's what we're trying to correct. And when we make that differentiation, it's very important, because otherwise we'll see, let's say something happened bad in the world and we'll immediately think, oh, it's because we're not corrected. No. Even if you were at full correction, you would still see those things happening in the world. So the idea is to have focus on what you should feel bad for. The bad is on our correction of our perception and not of the correction of reality. The third question is, why is it important to continue working in reality even if the actions we do are not spiritual? And Rick.
It's like Lolishma. Even though you are doing acts for yourself, it is, still with the intent to please the Creator, even though you don't do it properly. And so it is important to keep working at this so you start to get an understanding of the difference between giving to a friend, trying to bestow upon a friend without getting anything in return, and then taking it to the next level of doing it with, bestowing upon the Creator. So we have to work on this in any way we can in corporate reality so that we have later the skills to do it in spirituality.
Robin.
Well, it's about intent, like Rick was saying. And if we're not aimed in that direction, if we're not exercising muscles in that direction, the vessels won't form. You won't get the light that will build the vessels. And reality is the only place we exist. So how can we do anything in spirituality until we attain that a little bit?
Renee.
Again, the question makes me nuts a little bit, because there's only one reality and there's just a different way of sensing it. And so I think that instead of reality, I'll use like actuality, because it indicates action. My actions are important. How I extend love to everyone, because the only force in the world is love. That's why the only reason we exist is through the love of the Creator. And so we have to reflect that. So I read, and I don't remember where, but somehow our actions here do change things across the barrier. I don't know. I could be totally wrong, but I'm almost positive that I've read that. So.
Lee.
takes me a minute to get to the next screen. I'm sorry. Am I understanding you're saying internal work in reality, or are you saying work to support yourself? And obviously, we've got to do the first. You know, no flower, no Torah. But like everyone said, it's, and I didn't let you answer the question, but it's just this incline of through low lishma back to lishma, and that's what I've got to share. Thank you.
Rono.
I would say that in this reality, we're learning to perceive correctly. This is where we're getting the correct perception of the spiritual world.
Jeffrey.
Yeah, I'd say the realities where the rubber hits the road, you know, and we get to work out, we get the data input that we need to do our internal processing. So it's vital that, like you said, we can't go into isolation, seclusion, like into the cave like they did years ago, or to an island. We have to stay out here and mix it up with humanity, the group, and our personal friends. Thank you.
Peter.
Yes. Well, I think that since we haven't reached the final correction, we can't really move forward unless we're dealing with reality, because reality is where we get we see our deficiencies. We don't see our deficiencies in the spiritual. So we moving towards the spiritual, but in reality we see our deficiencies, and from there we get our discernments, which move us forward.
Moshe.
Yeah, I was just gonna say pretty much what Peter said. The only reason I'm doing any type of physical actions is to gain discernments over it. You know, they say the reward is the work itself. So when you have these, you know, feelings of whatever, hate and jealousy or whatever, all these other things that you just don't want to do things, well, that's the reward there. So that's the only reason you do it is because the reward is the work itself.
Alan.
I don't know if it's appropriate, but I just love your answers. Thank you so much. Until I'm fully awake, this is where my messages are. This is where my school is. This is where my testing ground is. This is where I repay my debts, and this is where I give my thanks. It's all I know how to do, and I'm practicing it. I'm practicing. Thank you.
Nechama.
I'm really also all the guys giving these wonderful answers, and it really confirms what I feel inside. Like Peter and Moshe said, when we go out to do the work, this is the place where we get the opportunity to have discernments that we deal with inside.
I totally agree. The idea is that because we're not trying to correct reality, we still have to continue acting like human beings in humanity, and we can't just be like, oh, the creator will give me money, or but on the other hand, we don't want to fall into the trap of thinking that everything we do in the society is spiritual as well, because everything we're doing with our hands and legs and speech, everything we're doing with our body is totally physical and has no spiritual reward whatsoever. And it's important for us to know that, because one, there are people, for example, who do, religious, acts, and they've done that for years, and there's no perception correction in them whatsoever. The idea is to make that differentiation in order to know where's the effort going to get me the correction, which is in my discernments that I get from reality. But I still have to continue working in reality, even though it's not going to give me any spiritual reward, precisely because it's the preparation. It provides me the environment, the structure. From within, I'll get those spiritual discernment. So if I don't have the reality, I won't have the framework for me to get my spiritual discernments. But there is a separation between them. I can be in a society for many years and have no spiritual growth whatsoever. Rav iterated it today on the Shabbos lesson, that you can be in the society for years and be in management and do so much stuff and have zero spiritual growth. There's a separation between them. Our physical actions that we do with our body are not spiritual correction, and all our effort and all our reward is in the work that we do with the discernments. I'll show you the diagram of article number 2. So as you can see here, we've got the creator and we've got creation. And in reality, we cascaded down from the creator, which is the will to bestow, and we cascaded down to this world, which is the reality we see in front of us, which is separated by time, space, and motion. And our correction is going from our perception being in reality and thinking, we're living in a world and we're surrounded by people, and to slowly correct our perception to a point where the reality is inside us, and we understand that perception is inside us, and the creator is even inside us. And when we reach that full correction, that's when we return to the creator domain, and feel that we are the creator and are acting fully as him. What do you think?
I'm trying to ask you why you call this reality and that perception instead of vice versa.
Because what we have in our 5 senses is reality. So if I'm looking at a cup and you're looking at the same cup, we'll say it's the same cup. We'll know the colors, unless one of us is colorblind. We're able to say what is the color of the cup. And it won't be like, oh, the reason you see it's green and I see it's blue is because you're not corrected. No, we both see it the same color. So you could have, Rav will look at a cup, and a student below the barrier will look at the same cup. They'll say it's the same color. The change is not in our senses. The change is in our perception of how reality works, of how people respond, how we're responding with ourselves. Many times we say we want one thing and we actually are inviting another. That's where we're doing our correction. We're not trying to correct our senses. If someone's colorblind, correcting his perception won't suddenly make him not colorblind. He has to go to a real doctor or a real physician to deal with that issue. So this is, again, that separation between reality, which is called the direct light. It cascades from the creator down to our 5 senses. And then we've got our perception, which is moving where we feel we are, where we relate ourselves to, from our 5 senses to move back into the creator's domain, into looking at the system from the side, looking at the system's perspective, and not just what I see from my 5 sense perspective.
So what happens to our senses at that point? I mean, where are we going with it from the system's perspective? How do we get to that place?
Well, until the end of correction, our 5 senses will stay exactly the same. There's no change there whatsoever. Bala Sulam, he reached end of correction. He was still able to look at a book. He was still able to write. It wasn't he was like, oh, I feel one with the universe and therefore I can't write a book. You can still write. You can still see people and still talk to them. So his 5 senses are totally intact the entire way. It's not like we're taking mushrooms and we're like, oh, I feel one with the universe. Like, he's still able to interact with people. So you still want your 5 senses to be from the person's perspective. He still has those 5 physical senses. The spiritual is how you interpret those senses. So you're adding a spiritual layer. It's like the interpretation of those 5 senses changes. So we're still having the same input. The 5 senses still have the same input, but the way we interpret those events, the way we see who we are, it's totally different between, when you're watching a movie, you're still looking at the movie, but the way you interpret the movie, you understand, for example, that you're not in the movie, that you're outside the movie, but you're still looking at the movie. So the idea is that when we're watching this movie of reality, we, at the lowest level of perception, we think we're in the movie. And we're not interacting with the movie. It's like a game, when you're playing a game, even though you're playing the game, you're not in the game. You know that there's a character in the game, and you're looking at the game from that character's perspective. You still don't see that you're the character. So if the character dies, you're not like, I die. The character dies. And we have to slowly switch to that perception of we're playing a game. And you still play the game correctly. So, just because you think it's a game, you don't just like, oh, I don't mind if anyone kills me. I don't mind what's happening in the game. Like, you're very serious about the game. But you've still got this double perception where I'm in the game and I'm outside the game. So the system is when I'm looking outside the game. I'm looking at the system. I've got multiple, views. I understand what's happening here. But at the same time, I'm still my character, and I still have to play as that character.
Yeah, you were mentioned once in, I remember I watched one of the sessions where you were talking about watching a movie, and then it's not so much the what you think about the movie, it's how you can use the whatever happened in that film to move you forward. But yeah, when you watch a film, you're emotionally involved with it, so you're affected on that level. So take the analogy for the cup, for example. Just go back to that for a second, because that has to deal with perception. Let's say I show everybody a blue cup, and everybody says, oh, that's the blue cup. And then I put the cup away. And then we're all having a conversation. And then maybe a few minutes later, I say, okay, I want everybody to think of a cup. Well, the first thing that comes to everybody's mind is a blue cup. So then let's flip that for a second. Let's say there's no cup. And then I say to everybody in the room, or to all of us now, think of a cup. So you might think of a blue one. Rick might think of a red one. I might think of a green one, right? We all have, that's our perception, right? We know it's a cup, but we don't know its essence really. We know that the cup exists, but in our own perceptions, it's all different because we have nothing to relate it to other than our own experience. You see what I'm getting at here?
But we're not trying to actually even correct that. So it's not like we're trying to make sure that when everyone thinks of a cup, they think of a cup of a certain color. What we're trying to correct is the way we relate to, for example, it's mostly on the people's level, I would say. We're not trying to change the way we relate to animals, or the still or the vegetative. We're not trying to see trees different or relate to trees different. Or the way I feel about a tree is wrong. It's like, that's not what our correction is. And it's basically in people, the way we relate to people. When in the Zohar it talks about angels, and it's talking about people. Angels are people who are who don't have a point in the heart. Those are angels. They're people that are totally in control by the system and have no aware they're in control by the system. That's why they're called angels. An angel is someone who is not even aware that he's being controlled. So it's not, normally when we think of angels, we're thinking like we're imagining all different stuff. It's not. They're dealing with the perception that they actually perceived. And they're not dealing with, there's enough that we have to deal with the people that we interact, and we don't have to start like thinking, oh, now we have to handle another layer of imaginary angels, or even if they're, let's say, they were real, like, so I now have to deal with people and angels? No, the angels are people. So we're trying to correct the way we relate to reality and not change reality itself. God created reality, and it's perfect the way it is. We, in our correction, don't see that perfection, and that's what we're trying to correct. It's like we're watching a movie and we don't agree with the movie. So our correction is to start to understand why the movie is like that. Why did the director choose it like this? What is he trying to convey? And that is our correction. Our correction is to not make the world a better place, because by saying that, we're saying that the world is currently not good. And that if we were the creator, we'd do something different. The idea is to get to the point where we understand why the creator is taking us on this road and how to join him and be proactive in bringing it towards the goal that he wants to bring it in the first place.
I mean, we should never take action to make the world like peaceful, or talk about that for a minute. Like, it seems like the conversations today are about, making the world a better place, doing this, pollution, war, crime, relationships, etc. Everybody talks about that with such passion now. So we should just, it's on this path of Kabbalah, we should just be neutral. We should just allow it to just unfold and then look at it from the side or above.
The idea is to act on each degree as that degree. So when you're in humanity, you act as a human. A human cares about wanting peace on earth and wants to, reduce the wars, and he wants to reduce the pollution. That's what a human does. And you have to have that state as well. Remember, the whole idea is we're not being like one or the other. We're adding layers on top of ourselves. We're building multiple interactions with our reality. So we have the first level of interaction, which is as humanity. That means we have our family, we go to the toilet, we eat, we vote, and we have to, think and what we want to actually vote. We're not going to be like, oh, I don't care what I vote. I'm now a spiritual being. I passed the barrier. Who cares who I vote? No, you have to think of who you vote. A Kabbalist will vote. That's the law, and he will choose what he needs to vote for. When you're dealing with your family, you're not going to be like, well, I'm a Kabbalist. I don't need a family anymore. It's like, no, you still keep that human element correct. You still go to the doctor if you're not feeling well. All that stuff you still do as a human. On top of that, we're now adding the spiritual society. The spiritual society has different laws than humanity. So, for example, in humanity, if you're, got a legal fight, where do you go to? You go to, the courtroom. In the spiritual society, you don't go to the courtroom. You have to go to the society's, people which are in charge. You have to go to the Rav. You have to deal with it on a different level than you deal with things in humanity. And then you've got the group level. And on the group level, right, so now we've got 3 levels. On the group, you're going to deal with it different. Because in the spiritual society, what they want is meaning. So when you're in the spiritual society environment, you're not going to talk to them about, oh, I want to become the creator. You're going to talk to them about meaning of life and how we need meaning and how we need to do the spiritual society chores and how we have to, do this and we have to go to the lesson and all that stuff you're going to do. In the group, it's going to be a little different. You're going to interact and talk about how we're going to become the creator, how we can empower each other, right? And then you've got, on top of that, you've got the individual phase. And so now we've got 4 different interactions with the world. Now we've got the individual phase. In the individual phase, you'll have specific friends that you probably got from the group, which were in the spiritual society, which are in humanity. And you're going to tell them things that you wouldn't tell anybody else. You're going to start sharing your perception degrees. You're going to start saying, I'm on 3.4. Where are you? I'm on 2.3. And you're going to start asking for more intimate help of, how do I deal with this issue and how do I deal with that issue that you wouldn't go to the group and you wouldn't go to spiritual society and you definitely wouldn't go to humanity for. So it's not, am I an individual or am I in humanity? I'm in all 4 at the same time. And then on top of that, that's only before the barrier. So after the barrier, now you've got another state to deal with. So you've got the state of the individual, you've got the group, you've got the spiritual society and humanity. And on top of that, also, you're the creator, you're a Kabbalist, you pass the barrier and you have that to deal with as well. And we have to add these multiple layers and deal with them accordingly. It's not like, oh, if I'm the creator, then I don't have to be human. Or if I'm a human, I can't be the creator. It's like, no, you have to have all these layers within you, just like you treat your family different from you treat at work. If your son does something wrong, you're not going to, send him to the work and tell him, that, my son is not acting correctly. They'll be like, your son's not working at our job. Like, what are you doing? So you already have those separations horizontally in humanity. You now have to build those vertical degrees as well.
Just to add also, the way to measure yourself is also through the society. I mean, you're not going to measure yourself through, 99%. What are they going to tell you? How do you measure yourself? So you got to measure yourself in the environment where it's, everybody's towards the same goal. Then you can see how far away, how far along the path you are.
So all these horizontal levels have to be connected together, or otherwise I guess we'd go insane, right? I mean, we have all this to deal with. I mean, they all have to connect at some point as we develop.
So we see as we go from children to adults, we took the time of slowly making these categorizations in humanity. Like at home, there's one way I deal with things. Like I had a conversation today with my daughter about strangers. Like, so, am I her parents' strangers? No. But if I do specific things with her, then she also needs to go to the police. So the idea is that with we all make these sections of these people are different from these people. And when grandma and grandpa come over, they're not strangers, but they're not our parents either. When you go to work, you're going to have work separate from family. You're going to have friends separate from work. You're not going to go to your boss and saying, well, I wrote down that I worked today. And they're like, but you weren't at work. You're with your friends. It's like, but I thought friends are work. It's like, no, there's work and there's friends and there's family. And you already made those separations as you're going on. So we're just adding more tension and more responsibility that now you also have that you're already like new because you're in the spiritual society. So you already had that other layer. And there's another 2 layers. There's the group, the individual, and then afterward you pass the barrier. It's also a Kabbalist and you feeling that adhesion with the creator. And you have to deal with all of them at the same time.
I don't know if I agree with you on that voting thing. Kind of feel like I'm supposed to detach and voting for Turkey 1 or Turkey 2. It just really upsets me. I see the friends fighting over stuff like that. It's like, guys, this ain't it. So I guess it's an internal discernment, but I'm way past that.
Well, the idea is as you grow onto high levels, you will have less importance for low levels. But the idea is to still try and keep them going. You can't be like, oh, now that I'm a Kabbalist, I don't need to care about the world, and I don't need to care about the environment, and I don't need to care about work. And like, if you don't care about work, you'll get fired. Even if you're the Kabbalist of the highest degree, you're still going to get fired. So the idea is to still, even though we lose importance for them in our perception, since we're dealing always with the highest level, that's where we have our most importance. If we have the individuals, those will, in our thoughts and emotions, that's what we'll be thinking about most of the time. And then afterwards we'll have the group and the spiritual society and the humanity. But we still have to work hard on doing these physical actions, even though they're not spirituality. And if I would say like this, the work that you were doing before you're in the spiritual society, continue it. So if you weren't voting before, don't vote after. But if you were voting before, continue voting. You have to keep that tension. Remember, the idea is that we have this tendency to think, oh, I'll just do the highest level thing. No, you need all 4 levels of that tension to pass the barrier. So if you only focus on individuals, you won't pass the barrier. If you only focus on the spiritual society, you won't pass the barrier either. And if you only focus on humanity, you won't pass the barrier. You need all 4 levels and the intensity of them, and then you can pass the barrier. Because remember, when you're passing the barrier, you're going to be looking back down on these 4 levels and interacting with them. So if you haven't built those interactions before, what exactly are you going to be bestowing to? What light are you going to be transferring to others? So you need those interactions with all those first degrees, so that after you pass the barrier, you can now go back as the creator and start interacting with them differently.
I kind of look at the law as being the dividing line for me. If they said it was law that I had to vote, I would obey. But it's sort of like the effort and the time it takes to make an intelligent decision, where there perhaps might not be an intelligent decision to be made, is wasting my time that I could be reading Kabbalistic texts. That makes sense?
Of course it does. I'd say it also depends on the interactions you have with your friends. If you're talking about the friends prior to Kabbalah, a lot about, who should we vote for, then you probably, should keep that going even after you, go into Kabbalah. The idea is not to, we have a tendency when we go into the spiritual society to allow our friendships and our families to decay and to fall away. I constantly hear of people that they're in spiritual society and then they get divorced and it's just because they neglect that humanity part within them. You need to keep that active. You need to deal with it, and you need to have all those levels. That's why we're not suddenly in the spiritual society and that's it. We're no longer human. We're now a spiritual society. It's like, no, we have to have all those 4 levels, and we have to be sane about this. And yes, if it really doesn't, you don't care, then fine, then don't vote. But there are other things like environmental. You can't be like, oh, if I'm a Kabbalist, it's only a game, I don't have to put things in the trash. It's like, no, you have to continue acting like with the game rules. You still have to put things in the trash, even if you're a Kabbalist.
And if I may say, there are real ramifications to these elections we have, because America's coming to a crossroads. We got this political faction known as the neocons, and should they take power, which they're angling for the presidency, we could have global thermonuclear war. And that might be, it might be easier to unite like 1 billion people rather than 7 billion, like after something cataclysmic like that. Then maybe the lessons would really be driven home, right? It's not 1 billion people left on the planet. So
the idea is that you do have to make those physical decisions. If you're walking past the street and a car's coming, you're not going to be like, well, what is it better? I'm in spirituality now. And then you get run over. Like, getting run over, you'll get run over. It's not because you're a spiritual Kabbalist, you won't have game over. Just like playing a game. I'm looking at the game. I can still get killed in the game. So it's important to, again, have those things. Where is the line? Everyone has to decide for themselves. That's why, even though we might share the same perceptions, we don't actually share the same reality. We're all in different locations with different considerations. Someone might have a family, someone might not. Someone might be divorced, someone might be married. Someone might not even, be at the age to get married. Someone may be able to drink, someone might not be able to drink. So the idea is that what we're getting, that's why I call it system concepts. We're getting concepts and we apply them ourselves into our individual life. And we're not actually coming into ask, okay, who should we vote for? That the person should deal with his humanity level and should go to his friends and family and deal with that issue there. So that's why it's very important for having those separations, because we're not going to go to the group and start saying, so what do you think is better, Coca-Cola or Sprite? Like that's not the kind of you don't have a workshop on what is the best drink to drink. So that's why it's also important to have those levels, because people that don't seem to have those separations, they start to mix and match between things. And like, oh, but I love the friends, so I should tell them about my favorite drink. It's like, how's that going to help you in spirituality? But like, they're my friends. They're only my friends now. I lost all my other friends. Well, it's like, maybe you shouldn't lose all your other friends. You have your friends for when you were talking about physical stuff, and you have your friends for when you're talking about spiritual stuff.
Well, you said, Zakai, you said that we share the same perception. I thought, are our perceptions different? Like the reality stays the same, constant, but the way you perceive something and I perceive it would be different. How do we share the same perception of something?
Because we're in a specific degree. Let's say, for example, two people are in 2.4, let's say. They're sharing the same perception degree. So they'll actually feel, think, relate to things more or less in the same way. They might have different discernments, but those discernments are because they're living different realities. So even though our senses are the same, we're still living in different areas of the world. So I'm not living where you are, and you're not living where I am. So I can never know how it is to live where you're living, and you can never know how it is to live where I am. So it's like, they're like totally opposite. So in reality, we share the same senses, but totally different experiences. And in perception, we have different perception degrees, but if you're in a perception degree of the same one, you actually experience the same. So you can see how they're like the total opposite.
So our perceptions are shared by the degree we're on, the spiritual degree.
Yeah, in Shamati 98, it talks about that, how two people that, it's like, how did they know what Avram said? They weren't there, they didn't time travel. When two people reach that degree of Avraham, they know exactly what he would say because they're in that degree. And then each person gets extra discernments, and that's why you've got all these commentaries. So again, it's that total switch where in perception, we each have a different perception degree. But if we have the same perception degree, or we passed that degree, so we can look back at previous degrees we're being, and then we can share and actually talk about those states that we've already been through. And we can actually have a dialogue there. It's called pe-el-pe, which is mouth to mouth. While in reality, we're experiencing totally different, even though we all have the same five senses. And if we went to the same location, we would see the same stuff.
Right. Yeah, I was reading that not long ago, and it says the question arises, how do they know what one said to another? Because those who reach the degree where Abraham or anyone stood, they see and know what Abraham saw and knew. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. To me, I understand that. Yeah.
And that's why we're coming together. If our spiritual degrees weren't the same, then we would have nothing to talk about. We wouldn't be able to read Kabbalah books. Like the whole idea of Kabbalah books is they're basically expressing degrees. And when you reach that degree, you read what they're reading, and you totally understand what they're referring to. And that's why we can come together to actually share our spiritual perception. While with humanity, we'll share physical experiences. So we'll go with the friends to the same beach, and then we'll come back and we'll be like, right, it was amazing. And each one will have different discernments on that experience, right? So one will say, did you see the women over there? And the other guy was like, no, did you see the men over there? And did you see the sea? Like we were trying to go to the beach, friends. And like each one will have their own discernment, even though they shared the same experience, like the same physical area. So the idea is that we're doing the same in spiritual. So we'll go through the same spiritual degrees, and then we'll start sharing, well, did you see what happened on that degree? And what do you think about that? And then, I'll be on a specific degree. Someone else will be on that degree or past it. And then they'll share, well, did you remember that, you experienced that? And I was like, oh, I didn't, I never thought of it from that. But now that you tell me about it, I can totally understand what you're talking about.
So can we move, let's say I had that experience with somebody. Let's say we met and then I had that, and you were on a higher degree. You sharing that experience to that degree, would that elevate me and pull me up to that degree faster than if I had to get there on my own? Is that how this is? You're pulling, we're constantly pulling. And
exactly. That's why we're reading. That's why we're reading Kabbalah books. That's why we're going to a Rav who's already gone through the degrees that we want to go through. Has he reached the end of correction? No, and he said that a few times. But he's so much far ahead of us that there's enough for enough traction to go through. And when he talks, he's talking from his degree, and we're like, wow, I don't actually see it that way. And then you're like, okay, now I know where I need to get to. I need to get to the point where I'll think that as well.
Yeah. So go ahead.
No, you go. You're on a train, but I'm following up with your line also.
So you're getting a sense of what degree, the Rav is saying something and he's kind of planting a seed in us so that we can move into that degree, because then we have to like grab that and it kind of just, go with that and move to that degree. Right?
So it's not the discernments of the higher degree that you're actually going to need. What you're going to need is the discernments that you need for the degree you're in, because normally when you're in a certain specific degree, it's very hard for you to actually discern what is happening with you and what you're going through. You can normally only discern after you've actually reached the next degree. And that's why at the beginning it's unformed, and then confusion, chaos, and then darkness, and then spirit. So it's normally in the darkness and spirit where you can actually figure out, okay, what degree am I in, and what does it contain? Because in unformed you have no clue, and in chaos you're still like confused. But wait a second, was I in this degree before, and now I'm in this different, and why am I feeling different? And so it helps when someone is on a higher degree than you, and then he can share with you, like, this is what you're going through. And it's like, oh, thank you for telling me, because I don't know what I'm going through right now. I'm a little confused. And so he can like help with that confusion. And it also gives support. There's also just like the emotional support of, I'm not going through this alone. And that's also very important as well. When you're going through a state of confusion or a state of darkness, you can sometimes feel very alone and very you can feel very like alone, and you need that support from the friends to get you out of it.
We're talking perceptions now, and it's bringing up a really important question. And yes, I know that much of this is for my discernment, but since we're all in groups, most of us, and we have members of our group who constantly define the group from their perception. Do I just let them, or do I try to make them understand they're defining the group from their perception? And I ask because the Rav tells us to lift the friends. So when you have someone whose perception is very low and dark, and they constantly are applying that to the group, it's defeating the purpose for lifting the friends on a certain level. And I see your questioning face. So they would say, we are all blah. And it's a really low state when that's their perception of what we are. Because when I look at we, I see we are all so amazing and beautiful and working towards a goal together. So does that make more sense? I still don't see that confused look leaving your face. It's called defining someone else's reality, is what I've always termed it. I try not to ever do that, but I make mistakes. And I like them to be pointed out. So how does that apply in our group work as Kabbalists?
It wasn't a face of confusion, it was a face of actually listening to what you're saying deeply. Again, we've got to differentiate between how the group is meant to do stuff, and that's reality, that's physicality, that's the society to decide. And not an individual in the group. Sometimes you'll have an individual wanting to take ownership of the group and forcing the group to go to a certain direction. And that's nothing to do with perception. That's to do with, how are we physically meant to do stuff? Is there meant to be 10 people in the group or 20 people in the group? Are we meant to get rid of all the slow people and only keep the tense people, or we allow everyone in? Like, do we listen to the entire lesson of Rav, or do we only listen to half the lesson of Rav? All these questions are society questions. They're spiritual society questions, and they're not spirituality questions. They're physical questions. And they needed to be dealt with on a spiritual society level. So it's not like, if someone says to you, if you have an opinion on it, it's not a spiritual opinion. It's a physical opinion. It's like, should I want a blue cup or a green cup? You've got 10 members, and everyone wants a blue cup, and you think it should be a green cup. Well, you'll probably go by what most of the people say. So if most people want blue cups, you'll probably give in and say, okay, well, we should probably have blue cups, and not force my opinion of I like green cups onto everybody else. Or sometimes you'll go to a person of authority. So you'll be like, look, you're all wrong and I'm right. So I'll go to a higher authority for them to dictate for you what you're meant to do. Like at work, you want something at work, you try to convey it to the people in the group. If it doesn't work, then sometimes you go to a person of authority, you go to your boss, you're like, look, they're doing this totally wrong, and you explain your point of view to him, and he might tell you, look, you have to go and actually deal with it as a equal member, or might sometimes say, this is totally wrong, this is against company policy. He comes down and he says, look, we're not doing this anymore. I don't care whatever you've got to say about it. So, but those, again, there are spiritual society things, and they've got nothing to do with our perception. So you could have someone who's very strong and someone's very light. That's nothing to do with the light person could be total correction, and this tense person could be zero correction.
Let me make it personal. They walk in and they tell you that you haven't crossed the barrier. They tell you, you haven't done this, so blah. To you're already, I don't know where you are. I'm just using it as an example. You haven't had your first discernment yet. That would be good. And you're looking, and they're saying it about your whole group that's gathered, and you're from a higher place, and you can see that some of them have and some of them haven't. Is there a reason for someone to walk in and keep beating a dead horse and telling the rest of the group that over and over? There may be. I don't know. That's why I'm asking you.
It normally happens because the person is not aligned with himself. It normally happens when people are frustrated with themselves, and then they bring it onto the group. They feel that they're not advancing fast enough, and then they think that the group is responsible for their growth, and they go to the group and tell them that they're wrong and that they're the reason that they're not advancing. And then they try to apply all different physical changes. Oh, we allow this material, that material. They do all these changes to try and deal with the inability for themselves to grow. So instead of coming to blame the group, they should actually come to the group and ask for help. But there's a tendency sometimes, and it can especially happen to us in the chaotic or darkness part of a degree, where we're just feeling that tension and that pain, and we don't know what to do. So we go to the group and we start complaining. It's the same happens in each degree. So a person might do it with his family as well. He's in some kind of confusion, and then he goes to his family, blames his family. It's like, he blames his parents. It's your fault because you didn't give me the right education. That's why I'm feeling like this. And it's like, it's got nothing to do with it. You can have two people going through the exact same experience of the parents and relating it totally different. One might actually be in total acceptance, and the other person might be in total blame. The idea is to understand that the turmoil that person is going through, not allowing him to, do damage to the group, but having acceptance and understanding that he's going through a tough time and he probably needs help. And part of the help might be just leaving him alone and not going to help him because he probably doesn't want any help. He's still in that turmoil. But it's got nothing, again, to do with the structure of the physical group has got nothing to do with spirituality. So someone might be on a spiritual degree looking down at the group and blaming them and stuff like that. But the solution of should the group do A or B has got nothing to do with spirituality. And I think it's important to do that differentiation.
Thank you.
Most of the confusion is when we're mixing up spirituality and physicality, where we're thinking that something physical will affect my spirituality, and they don't. It's a preparation, it's an environment. But I decide the environment. I choose the environment I want. I don't change the environment to match what I want. I match myself to the environment I need. So it's like going to a supermarket and complaining, why aren't they changing your oil in your car? It's like, that's not what a supermarket does. It gives you food. Or you're going to the car dealer and saying, where's my veggies? It's like, what? It's like, you're a terrible supermarket. They're like, we're not a supermarket. That's not what we're trying to deal with. So the same is going to the group and blaming it for that they're the reason you're not spiritual advancing. It's exactly like going to a car dealer for your vegetables. The group is not there to help you advance spiritually. The group is there as a framework, as an environment for you to gain the discernments from them to grow spiritually. So blaming anybody that they're the reason you're not advancing it's never because of them, and it's always because of yourself. The only one stopping you from advancing spiritually is yourself, and it's never the environment's fault, ever.
So you're in a group There's 9 others besides yourself. You don't agree necessarily with the direction of the group. So rather than start a confrontation, is it better then to try and introduce your concepts into acts to participate in the group so that they get the discernments on their own?
I can tell you many times, I'm in the Physical Young group. There was an issue a few months ago when they wanted the men and women to separate. So and my view on it is I wanted them to stay together because, it allows me to get those extra discernments, women and men and, all these different, types of humanity give different perceptions and different interpretations. And I want to get them all. So by separating, that doesn't help me because I want more, I don't want less. But it was still the group's decision. So we had a workshop on it, and everyone told what they wanted, and I said I'm against it. And in the end, but while I was saying I was against it, I was willing to accept whatever the group decided. Because again, it's got nothing to do with my spirituality. If the system defines, at the end, the group's decision was that we're going to stay together. So the women and men are still together in the young group. But if they would have decided for it to be separate, then I'm like, that's what the Creator has given me, and I need to deal with that. And not say to the group now, oh, because you've made this change, I wasn't able to advance spiritually. So again, it's again that play. On one hand, you do the workshop, you actually tell people what you think. You have to express your opinion, unless you don't want to express your opinion. And that's your choice as well. But at the end of the day, you have to agree with what the group decides. Whether you think it's right or wrong, it doesn't matter. Because what at the end matters is the way you relate to the decision and not the decision itself.
Well, I see it as an opportunity to make discernments on what your thought processes are. I mean, I do things a little different than most. I have a terrible habit of going off on tangents at times. But at the same time, I always go back and nullify to the others, even if I don't agree with them. But sometimes in that disagreement, I look for ways of finding either verses or other things to support my position and introduce it back into the group. I'm, you might say, a little persistent.
But that's what we want. Each person has a different way we deal with these issues, and it's important as a group to have all these different colors. And we're not trying to do equality in our qualities. We're not trying to all be lazy or all be very fast. You'll have lazy people, you'll have fast people, you'll have introverts, extroverts, you'll have people that make a fuss about everything, and you have people that make no fuss at all about anything. And you need that combination because you want that color. You want that your discernments. You want color in your discernments because you want contrast. And how are you going to get the contrast if everyone's thinking the same and everyone's responding the same? That's what Bala Sulam talks about in the freedom of lack of what was it? Just a second. If anyone remembers this line, you can tell me. I remembered it. Lack of criticism causes decadence. So if we're trying to make everyone think the same, then we've lost all chance to discernments. If you go to an island where everyone thinks exactly the same, the discernments you're going to get are going to be very low quality.
It's always the tension, isn't it?
It's always about the tension, but knowing how to handle it. And providing yourself an environment where you can handle the tension in.
So how about, do the Kabbalists yank the students' chains, right?
Yeah, like Rav today, he is maybe I'll move to another group, and then I'll be there for a few months, and then I'll move to another group. It's like he's not going to move to any group. He's just trying to play with the students, trying to get them rattle their chains. He's not going to move anywhere. But he does this every so often. So every few months he'll do this. Like, that's it. You know what? Maybe I should move to Canada. He said a few months ago. Like he just likes to rattle the chains. And when you know that's what he's doing, then you can just enjoy the spectacle.
See him get annoyed too about someone will ask a question at a convention or whatever it is we're watching, and they'll start at, well, our group, and they start describing problems. But I'm like, I don't care. What your group is your group. Is there a question that is relevant to what it is, we're studying, what the text is? And I find in one sense, he's like, he wants this tension between us. He wants us to learn to communicate, connect, and overcome our differences in unity. So, I mean, it's like, I think it's a great strategy he has.
He's not trying to be a kindergarten teacher. And many times people will bring him kindergarten questions. Rav, we're all fighting with each other. What should we do? It's like, deal with yourselves. You're human. Like, you're adults. What are you, 3-year-olds? Like, hey, you made me cry. Like, like, oh, I guess I'm going to deal with this now. Like, he says he's a teacher. He's trying to give us, and just shows you that those questions aren't spiritual. Otherwise, you deal with them. Those are physical questions. Rav, do we have 10 people in the group? Do we have 9 people in the group? Do we have 11? And sometimes he'll spend time, like especially on Shabbos, he'll spend time to deal with these more physical questions. But it has to be an appropriate time. So you can't be in the middle of like Tas and we're dealing with, a partzuf, gagalta, and enaim, and then someone says, Rav, should we have 8 people in the group or should we have 9 people in the group? It's like, get out of here. Don't come back. Like, it's all about context. And just because you're a Kabbalist doesn't mean you don't get angry. Kabbalists are very emotional, but they're emotional about the right things. So they're not going to get emotional about petty things. Like you read Bala Sulam's letters. He's like, wicked fool. Like you should immediately go to Bala Sulam and say, Bala Sulam, what happened with there's no one else besides the Creator? But the idea is that a Kabbalist cares deeply about certain stuff. And even though he knows that the Creator is behind everything, it doesn't mean that he doesn't have to respond in the game. It's like if someone is harassing you, you're not meant to be like, oh, there's no one else besides the Creator, and then just accept it. You don't have to agree with it. Remember, the acceptance is internal, not external. So if someone's harassing me at work, I have to deal with it in the right channels, but still know that is a total robot and it's the Creator harassing me. And if the Creator is harassing me, I need to put him in his place.
Zakaya, a lot of variables that over the last 10, 15 minutes, we've all been sharing on this whole thing about group. And, I don't know how many here are in America in the virtual. I know most of the friends, the ones that I know in the young group. And so there's, I want to put this all in writing. I can write better than I can talk, and obviously more time to connect all these dots. But it's like, we that are maybe aren't in Israel, aren't in a physical group, this whole dynamic of spirituality and parsing the two of the factory, as Rav calls it, or the corporeality, reality, however you want to split it, all these factors. And I don't know, it's just, I feel this pressure, good pressure building up in me, but it's like, I respect you there in Israel, and you're able to handle the word rightly in all this and helping us. And I don't know how many implants have come over from Israel and tried to, be involved in BB development. I know there's EC, and all of this, and I've been around since 2010 was my first Congress. So I've tried to integrate into the group, for over the years. And just, I don't know, this conversation is very helpful, and I don't even know how to end it, except that, my heart just, breathes a big sigh of gratefulness and hearing all this, that there needs to be more help here in America from BB. And maybe there is, and I don't know about it because I'm struggling with, you talked about the family and all that. I could interject my experience and my corporeality, and I don't want to bring that in, but it's like so many dynamics. I've been in this meteorite, trying to listen to my heart and strive towards spirituality and keep my foot in groundedness over here in corporeality, and I've hamstrung myself, and so all of that to say, I love this method. It's life. I can't imagine life without the friends and the system concepts and all the discernments, and yet my heart aches too, because I've taken a beating, and I know there are many other friends. I'm just one part of the soul that has taken a big beating corporeally, my head's swirling, and I turn right, I turn left, I've crashed in the spiritual simulator too many times, but obviously it's not too many. That's my perception, and everything's perfect and I'm on course, and but it is quite exhausting, and I'll leave it at that. Thank you. You can add however you can.
I totally understand you, Lee. That's where individuals come into play. So when we have these frictions and we have a personal issue in corporeality or spirituality, that's where we go to an individual to talk with. We find a friend that we're very close to, or we find a friend that can help, and we do a one-on-one. Because what we're basically doing in a group meeting, we're sharing eternal discernments. So we're sharing discernments which are devoid of time, space, and motion. We're trying to share discernments that could apply to any group. We're sharing discernments that could apply to any person and could apply to any degree. So when you have, and many people have this, so you go to specific people. I have specific friends that when they have a problem, they come to me and I go to them. And those are my individual friends. And I'll go to them and I'll say to them, I just had a big descent. Like, I'm not going to come to this group meeting and start saying, oh, I had a big descent. This is not the place for it. What you do is you go to your individual friends and you tell them, I had a descent last night, or I had an ascent, or I had this, this great new discernment of how I should, interact with my work, or I'm having a problem, with my colleague, or I'm having a problem with my wife. Those discernments, those you can share with individuals. And that's precisely why I was talking about those different levels. Once you know what each level is meant to give you, life becomes so much more easier to handle. If you know a supermarket is to provide you buying food, and you know that the oil, the car dealer is to give you an oil change and fix your bumper, and you know that the mail will deal with sending letters over to places. Like, thinking of going, someone doesn't know, he goes to the mail place, he's like, can I have some milk? It's like, what? They're like, milk, I want some milk. This is the mail service, right? Can I have some milk? It's like, no, we send mail, we don't give milk. And so the same thing, we come to the spiritual society, or we come to the group, or we come to the humanity, and we're coming to the spiritual society, and we're like, oh, it's so hard wanting to become the creator. And they're like, what is your problem? That's not the goal. The goal is not to become the creator. And the idea is to have meaning and do what Rav says, and and follow the society and have that equality. And you go to humanity and like, oh, being the creator is just so hard. Like, what is wrong with you? And again, so you need to differentiate between those degrees vertically, just like you do horizontally in humanity, and then life becomes much more easy to handle. So if you're having a descent, that's why it's so important to build those individual relationships, because you feel all high five with the group, but when you fall into a descent or you have a problem and you don't know how to deal with it, that's where your individual friends are going to come into play. And it's very important to have all those degrees.
Let me add to that, just a closure on my part, is I have, I'm not blaming anyone. I don't have an axe to grind with anyone. And I have attempted to do that, but I know it's all my fault, and I just have either not enough correction / connection, whatever. I've tried to develop some of those friendships, and I just I keep crashing and burning, but that's okay. I'm gonna fly one day, or I am flying.
Everything you said, that's not the fault. Even a Kabbalist gets sick. Okay, even a Kabbalist might get fired from work. Just because you're Kabbalist doesn't mean you're suddenly protected from everything. Bala Sulam had like writing issues. He had like pains. Like, but you're at end of correction. How could you have pains? It's like it's nothing to do. Again, that separation between reality and perception. Just because you're going to be a Kabbalist doesn't mean automatically suddenly everything's going to go well. If you don't have feet, if you don't have any legs, before you come to Kabbalah, Kabbalah's not going to suddenly give you legs. No matter how hard you try, you can reach the end of correction and become the creator, you still won't have legs. So it's again important to do that differentiation precisely because then you know where to deal with. The problem, it's like I said last time with the washing machine. The problem wasn't me. The problem wasn't the washing machine. The problem was I wasn't reading the instructions of the washing machine. And once I read the instructions of the washing machine, then I know how to use it correctly. So it's very important not to blame ourselves, which is also a shell, and not to blame reality. The idea is the idea is to learn the instructions how to interact with it. So if things are crashing and burning in your life, the problem is not the things, and the problem is not you. The problem is you lack the instructions to know how to deal with them correctly, and that's what we're trying to correct in our perception.
Thank you very much. From
No
the
problem.
bottom of my heart.
But that's what we have these sessions for, to allow to like realign. We go through stuff, and when we go to the spiritual society group, right? Because the group is also in spiritual society. It's like we might have a group which is actually in humanity. If you go to an AA group, they're a humanity group. They're not a spiritual society group. They don't want to become the creator, and so you've got to go to the right venues and express yourself in those right venues, and that's. The reason why I'm bringing this level is to add on top. It's not to replace. It's not someone says, oh, I'm in system concepts, I don't have to be in a group. If you're not going to be in a group, what are you going to come to the system concepts with? The idea of the system concepts, you're in a group, you're in a spiritual society, you're in a humanity, and then the system concepts comes to clear out all these issues that you're having with those lower levels. But if you don't have those discernments on those lower levels, what are you going to be bringing to system concept? What problems are you going to have? If someone's in a remote island, it's got everything he needs, he's not in a group, he's not in a spiritual society, he's not going to come to system concepts. Most people come to system concepts when they want clarity on how to deal with these different degrees and how to relate to them correctly and how to perceive them correctly.
I come here to help clean up my own personal concepts of what I feel and think so that I have a broader view and be more objective in my views.
So it works both ways. If you didn't express yourself, no one else could hear that either. Like when these are recorded and when I upload them, other people watch them afterwards and they get to relate it to their situations as well. That's why I always find it very important that in this group, there's no name calling. It's corrected gossip. People might think that they understand what somebody else is talking about, but since there's no naming, no one actually has a clue. You might think we're talking about person A, but we're actually talking about person B. We might not be talking about any people whatsoever. And that's why it's so important to keep it on this corrected gossip where we're talking about things that are above time and space and motion, that we're not talking about a specific group, and we're not talking about a specific person, and we're not talking about it at a specific time. Because someone might watch this a year later, and if you give that specific time, space, and motion, he can't use that for himself anymore. Or if he wants to use it, he has to first disconnect it from time, space, and motion, and then apply it to his own situation. And that's why, if you're able to do that separation and give a discernment which is above time, space, and motion, you'll find that other people are able to use it as well, and they're actually very enjoy it, and will able to use it years later when they watch these recordings.
I just want to add, actually, it's strange how, if you watch the Rav speaking or watching any of these recordings and things like that, and sort of like whatever state you're in at the current moment, it's like if you really want to gain discernment, it's like the lesson is talking directly at you. I mean, it's insane. Like how exactly what you're going through is the exact same, lesson that you're hearing, the word that you're hearing. It's insane. It's because your vessel has changed again. And it's just so good,
there'll be many times where someone will attack you on something and they'll say, who do you think you are that you think you're A, B, and C? And then the next day, Rav will say exactly the same stuff. You'll be like, you're nothing without me. You won't advance without me. It's like, wait a second. I thought, I just got attacked on that yesterday. So the idea is that you'll have these situations and then you'll hear them in the lessons and nobody else will hear that. You'll ask them, did you hear what happened in that lesson? It's like, I didn't hear that. It wasn't talking to them. And that's why I talk about the Rav is like the sun, where he just expresses so much in those 3 hours each day that each person picks on something different.
It's kind of creepy sometimes how it's so uncharted.
But it also shows how realities inside of us are not that we're in reality, precisely because we discern what we want to see in reality. It's like someone who gets married and has a child, only then does he see baby shops everywhere. And it's not like they suddenly were all built in that year that he had the baby. It's that they were always there and he just never saw them.
This is the thing. The truth of the matter is that, when we gain a higher level of perception, we start to understand the language of the Creator, and He's speaking to us in every way, in everything. And it's like, just the other day, I'm thinking about my, certain things that I'm going through, and I'm just watching a movie, and this guy is basically saying exactly what I'm thinking about, and it's like the Creator's talking to me. I'm like, okay, I got my answer. Thank you. I was like, oh, great, I got it now. Thank you. It's like crazy because again, everything is just a desire inside of you, and if you open your heart to sort of be aware of everything and to try to learn the language of the Creator, it's all around you in everything. Like the people that you meet, the movies that you watch, the songs that you hear, everything. But you just gotta be sort of prepare the vessel. That's really the key, is to prepare the vessel.
I find the same thing, Moshe, is that the Creator's speaking to us all the time in so many ways, and it's so subtle that we overlook it. We don't pay attention to what's being said to us by the Creator, so we just go on without thinking that anything's changed or anything's actually going on. But if you watch around you throughout your day, you'll find that He's speaking to you in millions of different little ways. It's just, are you ready to listen?
Yeah, well, the Rav says that all the time too. It's like, I think like maybe a few days ago actually, and I was thinking about it, and then the Rav mentioned it. It's the same situation, like, where like whatever I'm thinking about, and then I'm watching the lesson, it's like, okay, this is what he's talking about today, because it's just a desire in me, and he's talking to me. It's me, everything is me. It's like, yeah, and then so if you start treating the world like that, it's like it just becomes fun.
That's why it's very important to see that everyone's an expression of you. Because if you see them as separate people, then they've got nothing to do with me. But if you slowly relate to the world that everything's just an expression of me, that no one actually exists, only the Creator exists, and He's expressing Himself through me, through you, through everybody else, then it becomes a real enjoyment. Because it doesn't mean that you have to listen to everything. Just like when you're watching a movie, you don't have to notice all the details. I watched this YouTube channel called Honest Trailers, where I don't know if you've heard of it, that there's a movie and this person does an honest trailer on it. So he expresses the Avengers is like, have you noticed how, all the action, how are they actually talking to each other? And then everyone's like, yeah, how are they talking to each other? They have no Bluetooth pieces or anything like that. So you don't notice it when you're watching the movie, and then afterwards you're like, oh, I always notice. So it's the same kind of concept, but you don't have to notice everything. It's okay that you didn't notice how they were talking to each other in the movie. So it's not like we have to wake up tomorrow and then start focusing on every single nook and cranny. Like, what did you say? Wait, say it again, because I didn't hear what you said. It's like, relax, bro. You don't have to hear the lesson 3 hours, in succession, 3 times or 30 times. There's a new lesson on. No, but I haven't already discerned all the discernments I have to make on the previous 3 hours. It's like, let go. Let it be like water in a shower. You don't have to catch all the drops. You just have to get drenched.
Zakai, just adding that, I what you said at the top of that, watching whatever the title was, is like, oh, I've heard that before, and it wasn't a judgment or anything. It was like just feeling you talk was like such joy and just you know, seeing all of us, seeing each other as ourself, and just, you know, I almost am overwhelmed at listening to you, and the friends at these certain times, you know, that will peak, and as the creator, you know, gives me discernment or joy, whatever. But it's like, I guess the point I'm trying to make is, I was hearing this and just feeling you, and I guess that, like you say, let it flow through you. I'm understanding some already, I heard it, but it's like, that doesn't even matter. Just want to feel your heart, and know each of your heart, you know, and it's just awesome.
It's like energy. You have to let it go through your pipe. You don't want to block it. If you block it all, then it turns off. You have resistance, and that's what you actually catch on, that energy, and allow it to express through you. But you don't want to block it all, because then you won't get any more energy, and you don't want to just let it all through you without any resistance, because that's called a short circuit. So you need to do this play between allowing some of it to touch you, and that's the resistance. Every time it touches you, it means it resisted on you, because there was something to bounce on. And if it went right through you and you had ignored it, then there was no resistance, right? It's like throwing a ball on the wall. The ball, you know, hit the wall resisted the ball, and it threw it back. And you have to do those playings on how much you can resist and how much not. If you're like so tense emotionally, sometimes the best thing is just to become transparent. Do no resistance. Just let everything go through you. Don't have any like judgment or anything, because if you're going to judge too much, you're going to break under pressure. But then if you're in a situation where you can handle that, then try, you know, let it hit you. Like, you know, be a man, handle it, as they say, you know. And so you've got to, that's why each person has to do his own calculation, because one person might be in a situation where he's in an ascent, and he will try and like really struggle with like some explanation and task, and really wrap his head around it, and get frustrated about it, and allow himself to get frustrated about it. But if someone's in a descent, that's not a very good idea to do. When you're in a descent, the best is just to let things go, and just talk to a friend, and or read an article that will make you happy, and not try to say, oh, if I'm in a descent, I should bang myself to death. Exactly, you're sick in a descent, Moshe, yeah. So the idea is to know when you're sick and when you're well, and then deal with it accordingly. And that's why it's never about insistent concepts. It's never to tell you what to do. It's to give you concepts for you to know what to do about your specific situations. And that's why it's above time, space, and motion. You then apply it. That's why it's physicality. You apply it to your experience. That's why there's a difference between spiritual and physical. Spiritual is when it's devoid of time, space, and motion. That's the definition of spiritual that Bala Salam gives. And then you apply it into your physical reality, in your physical situation, and that's how we grow. So we always have to differentiate between our spiritual concepts and our physical experience. And we're always trying to apply the spiritual concepts into our physical experiences.
Lee, I want to make sure Lee was paying attention to that resistance talk, because I know his gears are turning now like mine are.
I know he likes electricity, so I knew you probably did enjoy that one.
Hi, what is the cake? Whose birthday? I'm in my end of my meeting. Oh, my mute's on. Sorry. I don't know. Maybe it's time to go. I got this big welling up coming inside, getting ready to explode, and then I won't be able to shut up. And then you'll all go, no, stop her, please.
Any final thoughts before we wrap this up?
There are no final thoughts, only thoughts that lead us to the next degree.
No, just a big thank you for doing a great job again.
You're all awesome.
Thank you very much. You can see, this is like the second article. So the second article was first in, first out. And first down is first up, which is probably the same thing. And it's, again, this idea of understanding there's a difference between the way reality cascades down, and knowing that our perception growth will be the exact same way. And understanding that by making a differentiation between these different degrees, life becomes so much easier. Part of breaking the confusion is precisely that we're in confusion. And that confusion means that we're not doing that separation. So confusion is normally to do that separation. When we have that separation, like the first blessing we do in the morning in part of the prayer service is, bless are you, the God, the King of the universe, that allow the rooster to differentiate, to have the understanding to differentiate between day and night. That's the first blessing. And the reason why that's the first blessing is because the first thing is to understand, to differentiate between two concepts, between day and night. And once you differentiate those, then you can start going into the discernments and start categorizing and start putting things into different compartments and understanding, okay, this is talking about this degree and this is talking about that next degree. But if you don't have that first, this understanding that there are separate concepts, even though they're all unified, they're all in the creator. But once you differentiate between the concepts, then you can actually work. So all the work is when you're doing this differentiation. And we always talk a lot about unification, unification, unification. The unification is done after you've done the differentiation. So you first got annulment, then you've got making that judgment, that separation, and then you've got that sweetening, which is that unification. And if you jump directly to the unification, you'll stay in that confusion. So the first way to get out of confusion is, one, to understand that, do that annulment that the creator is perfect and that we're not trying to correct reality, but trying to correct our perception. Then we can do differentiation, which is where it's starting to break them into concepts and understand this concept. People want to say, oh, it's the same. They're not the same. And once you've separated those, then afterwards you can unify them in your perception, saying they're the same. Or the creator's, revealing himself through both physicality and spirituality. But you have to go through that separation. It's very hard for us to sometimes judge our own perception. And it's very important because, Moshe, if you don't divide and conquer, if you don't divide, you can't conquer. So if you want to conquer your perception, you have to divide it first and see what you're dealing with. And I think that basically summarizes this whole meeting today. So thank you very much.
That was the creator did. The creator divided.
Yeah, he created a will to receive. The will to receive divides. Everything that goes into the will to receive is separating the concept. The light is the unification of everything. So light includes everything, and we have no discernments in the light. We only can do discernments when the light goes into the kli, when the light goes into the vessel. The light goes into the will to receive, and then we can give it names and appellations. So if we want the light to come into our vessel, we have to allow for that differentiation to happen, so that we can actually discern what's in the light. Because when we just look at the light, it's just light. And it's only when it goes into our vessel that we can start to differentiate between day and night, color and black and white, and so on.
Look at the rest of your sentence, though. Did he do that to conquer? He said we have to divide before we can conquer. So it's just got a little gear turning. But I just keep finding if I go into where it's too bright, I can't see until I've developed the eyes to see in that kind of light.
And that's exactly what the eyes are doing. The eyes are differentiating. The eyes are providing contrast. And it's like, why is it so hard to take pictures at night? Because the camera can't differentiate the differences, contrast. It's like, here's a picture, everything's in there. It's like, I can't see the details. So with the same thing, when we're looking at the light, there's no details. The details are when it comes into our vessels and when we separate and we're saying, I see the creator as A and not B, or as C and not D, but still understand that the creator is everything. But allowing our perception to do that as differentiations, because every time we're seeing any color, we're not seeing other colors. If I'm seeing black, I'm not seeing white. If I'm seeing white, I'm not seeing black. So I need to allow for that differentiation to happen with me, to see all those discernments. And that's what all the books of Kabbalah are about. If it was only just about the creator's one, you just need one sentence and get it over with. Well, why do we need all these books of all these different degrees and changes? And you should know that Malchut is like this and this stage and the breaking of the vessels. You should be like, oh, what does it matter? It's all one. The creator's all one. It's like, you can see that the Kabbalists don't, they have so much details to convey.
Yeah, we have to open our aperture, huh?
Exactly.
Was
Increase
Zakaya?
Yes.
Increase our opening aperture. I was going to add a question. you're using the word differentiation and discernments. We could also use codification too, right? Where, I mean, this is
Exactly.
where and Jews are, you know, great about that. It's all this refiner's fire processing, refining everyday thought, which Einstein said was the whole of science. So Kabbalist is this codification, recodification of the recodification, and continuing on and bringing more points in the heart to the table and continually refining.
Exactly.
Is
It's
that
all about refining and refining more and more and more and more. We want more and more details. We don't want less and less details.
sifting out the dross?
Exactly. But still having those abstractions to handle those details. So when we have an abstraction, it allows us to handle the details. When you have a picture, so picture is an abstraction, and it allows you to handle all the millions of pixels you see in the picture. So you're not looking at each pixel separately. That would take forever. Like, think if someone gives you a picture, he's like, what do you think of how we looked at the beach? And you're looking pixel, 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 pixel. You'll never get what's in the picture. So you need to constantly like do the zoom in, zoom out thing where you're looking at the details and looking at the abstractions. The creator is one. That is true. That's an abstraction. But there's details in it. He's one because look at this, how this aligns with that, and this aligns with that, and this aligns with that. But if you're only dealing with the details, you'll also get lost. So it's like people that only deal with the code of law, they get lost in themselves as well. You need to always move between the abstractions and details. And that's what beauty is all about. Beauty is all about the combination of abstraction and details. If you have a woman who has too many details, she's ugly. If she has too much abstraction, you can't even see the woman. So beauty is all about that alignment between details and abstraction and constantly moving between them. And that's the idea. The left line has the details. It's the will to receive. The will to receive has details. The right has no details. The right is all about the oneness, the unification, the connection, we're all one. So you need to constantly move between the left and the right to get details from the left and then get that abstraction from the right. So if you're only in the details, then you'll fight about and bicker about small things. And if you're only in the right, you'll have all this abstraction and you'll have no correction to do since everything's one and the creator is everything and the group is great and everyone's at the end of correction. And you need to constantly to make that middle line, which the middle line is the combination of details and abstraction, which is Tiferet. Tiferet is beauty. It's got the combination of the details from the left and the abstraction from the right.
Yeah, that's real interesting because I read a book by a neurosurgeon. This guy wrote a few amazing books before he passed away. But he talked about a lot about the right brain, left brain stuff, you know, when we were talking about. And the right brain is feminine. And it goes, it processes data in a holistic way. Like you were just saying, there's no details, right? It's the big picture. Right. Whereas the left brain, the masculine side, processes data in an abstract, linear, and sequential manner. And like you said, it creates a lot of contention and stuff, you know, bickering over the details and things, you know. So that's pretty incredible that it aligns like that, you know, the right line and the left line, just like the hemispheres of our brain.
Exactly. So the right hemisphere gives that sensation of oneness, and the left line gives the sensation of I. And the idea is being both. The idea is to be the creation and the creator at the same time. I'm God, and I can go to the toilet. Like I remember at the Congress, there was a situation where, you know, I was talking to loads of people, and it was amazing. And I was doing discerning and stealing souls. And then I went with my friend to the toilet, and standing there, and he was feeling a little like down, like, oh, we did all this work, and then we have to go to the toilet. And I was like feeling so awesome. It's like I'm the creator, and I go to the toilet. Like, what's more awesome than that? Can Zeus go to the toilet? So the idea is that we're trying to do this combination where we're the creator, where we have this oneness, this unification of everything. But at the same time, we're also human. We have details, and I'm living in a specific family. I'm not in your family. Yes. So the idea is to unify those two concepts into one. And that's our whole thing. But again, we have to do that separation first. So we first separate between I'm the creator and I'm the creation, and then I can unify them into one, which is I'm the creator that can go to the toilet. So thank you very much, everyone.
No, thank you.
Thanks, Zach. Thanks, everyone.